What the hell was that?
I heard that.
There are some studio myths out there that are so common and widespread that they've basically become facts. But the truth is, a lot of this common wisdom is total garbage, and worse, it's probably killing your mixes. I'm talking about those little rules and recipes that you see all over comment threads and in forums that offer you some sort of shortcut to a pro sound, but they're actually leading you to a mix that sounds weak, muddy, or just plain wrong. Today I'm going to bust 5 of the biggest myths that I see holding home producers back. These are the lies that keep you chasing your tail, buying gear you don't need, and second guessing every single decision you make in your DAW. I'm going to replace that bad advice with the truth and also give you some practical techniques that you can use right away for better results. For those who don't know me, I'm Eyal Levi, CEO of URM Academy. I've been a producer and guitarist in my band DAW since 1999 and have been playing way longer than that. Through my own production and engineering, as well as URM Academy and Nail the Mix, I've had the chance to work with and learn from some of the very best producers in the game. And I've seen firsthand what actually works in the studio and what's a complete waste of time. So let's get into it, starting with myth number 1, which is that auto-tune can make a terrible vocalist sound great. And the myth is that you can take any vocalist, no matter how bad they are, slap on some pitch correction, and immediately it's going to sound like a world-class singer. This idea got really popular from its heavy-handed use in pop music, where it often sounds like an obvious robotic effect. But here's the reality. Auto-tune fixes one thing and one thing only: pitch. It doesn't fix bad tone, doesn't fix terrible rhythm, it doesn't fix weak delivery, and it sure as hell doesn't fix a performance that's delivered with no emotion. And I've recorded enough vocalists in my career to know that there's no fixing a truly bad vocalist. Can tuning help? Absolutely. I've heard and worked with vocalists who have great natural tone, but their pitch is for shit. In those cases, you can use tuning to salvage a performance and make it sound way better, maybe even great, but there is a limit. The more you have to force a note into place, the more artifacts you're going to hear. It starts to sound weird and unnatural, not because you're using Autotune or Melodyne, but because you're forcing it to perform a miracle. The more extreme the tuning, the more obvious it's going to be that you tuned the shit out of it. If you're doing that for creative effect like T-Pain, that's totally fine. That's an artistic choice. But if your goal is a transparent, natural sounding vocal, the tool is best used for light touch-ups on an already good performance. Think of it like a little nudge. The singer delivered a performance with great tone, great rhythm, great charisma. It had that magic that you just can't recreate, but maybe it was just a little bit flat. If it has the it factor, it's probably in your best interest to keep it. That right there is the perfect time to use tuning. You just bump those slightly flat notes into place and no one will ever know. Pitch correction is a tool, but it's definitely not a substitute for actual singing ability. And speaking of mixing vocals, this video is brought to you by Nail the Mix. If you want to learn how to mix and master metal, Nail the Mix is the place to do it straight from the best. Mixers like Will Putney, Buster Odeholm, Jens Bogren, Nolly, TLA, David Bendeth, and artists such as Gojira, Meshuggah, Periphery, Opeth, Nickelback, and over 100 more. At the start of the month, we released the raw multi-tracks from the session so you can download them straight into your DAW and mix the song from scratch. Getting your hands on this kind of source material is an incredible learning opportunity, just so you can see what the standard really is like at this level. Then, at the end of the month, the mixer does a live stream where they break down exactly how they mixed it on the record and answers your questions live. You can also join our monthly mixing competition. Submit your mix, vote for your favorites, and win prizes like microphones, guitars, plugins, gear, and a lot more cool stuff. And your membership comes packed with extras. All the URM plugins, MixLab with over 150 tutorials, Riff Hard for guitarists, and access to our private community on Discord and Facebook. So if you're serious about leveling up your mixes and learning from the very best, check out nailthemix.com today. It's at the link in the description of this video. All right, let's move on to myth number 2, which is that analog automatically sounds better. This is the holy war of the audio world, and the claim is simple: anything analog beats digital. Tape is better than Pro Tools. A hardware compressor is better than a plugin. This myth comes from the fact that all the classic legendary records were made on tape and big analog consoles, so people associate that gear with that sound. But the truth is that better is the wrong word. Different is the right word. Analog gear has a certain color and character. Sometimes that character is exactly what you want: a little bit of saturation, some warmth, some glue, but sometimes it adds noise, distortion, or inconsistency that you don't want. People ask, what makes analog sound better? And I actually don't even know what they mean half the time. Are they talking about tape hiss? Are they talking about the fact that every single piece of analog gear sounds different from every other piece of analog gear, even if they're identical? The modern reality is that digital audio technology rivals or even surpasses analog in many technical areas. Plugins have become ridiculously good. I remember when the Kemper profiling app first first came out, people were super skeptical. At the studio I was at, we profiled all our real tube amps. Whenever a new band came in, we dial in a killer tone with a real amp and cab, mic it up, and then create a profile of it with the Kemper. After we had the profile, I'd do a blind test. I'd reamp a DI track through the real amp and then another through the Kemper profile, and I wouldn't tell the band which was which. 9 times out of 10, they guessed wrong. They thought that the Kemper was the real amp. After that, they'd want to use the Kemper for the rest of the record. Now, to be clear, I am not saying that a Kemper always sounds better than a real amp. What I am saying is that in a mix context, most people can't tell the difference. A Kemper, for example, isn't modeling the entire amplifier. It's capturing a snapshot of a specific tone at a specific moment in time. It's a digital recreation of one perfect tone you dialed in. At the end of the day, the tool that works best is the one that you know how to use. If you consistently dial great tones with an Axe-Fx, but you struggle with tube amps, which one is quote-unquote better for your record? Obviously, it's the one that serves the music, the one that you work better with. All right, moving on to myth number 3, which is that there's a perfect EQ setting for every instrument. This is maybe the most common myth of all. I mean, I know you've seen the charts online. Boost your kick drum at 80 Hertz, cut your guitars at 3.7K, add air to your vocals at 12K. It's tempting because it feels like a recipe. It feels like a shortcut. But let me be blunt. Saying that there are perfect EQ settings for every instrument is like saying that you can read a Gordon Ramsay recipe online, use the exact same ingredients, and that your dish will come out as good as his. You know it won't.
It's drier than the Sahara Desert.
All right.
Even the flies no longer interested.
The truth is, the perfect EQ is always 100% of the time context dependent. The exact same drum sample might need a massive high-end boost in one song to cut through a wall of down-tuned guitars, and in another, it might need a huge cut in the mids to make room for a raw, aggressive vocal. It all depends on the other sounds around it. You can't EQ a sound based on a chart that has nothing to do with the specific track you're working on. You have to EQ to fix the specific problems in front of you and enhance the strengths that are already there. That's why I never subscribe to any opinions or rules like, I hate mids, I love mids, scoop this, boost that. It's always context appropriate. The goal isn't to make a kick drum sound good in solo. Who fucking care what it sounds like by itself? The goal is to make the kick drum sound good in the mix. Does it work with the bass? Do you want the kick or the bass to own the lowest frequencies? You have to make that choice. No chart can make that choice for you. What if your guitars don't have an annoying buildup at 3.7K? Why on earth would you just automatically cut it? It makes no sense. So here's what you do instead. Forget the charts, set your EQ to a neutral setting, listen to what you've got, and go from there. At URM Academy, we teach a method called LDFC. It's a simple but powerful workflow. To demonstrate, here's a clip from a MixLab tutorial my partner Joel Wanasek made.
And this is something that's going to supercharge your mixing. It stands for listen, diagnose, fix, and compare. What you're going to do is you're going to listen to a sound in context, and you're going to then diagnose what you think is wrong with it. So once you've diagnosed, we're going to move on to F, which is fix. You're going to sit down and try to fix that problem. And then after you're done with it, you're going to compare it in and out of context and in and out of solo and see if you improved it. And if not, you're just going to repeat the process. Very simple. Okay, my first diagnosis is that the low mids and the low end sound kind of muddy. Just as I suspected, the guitars have a ton of low end in them. And there's two possible moves that we could do. The first is we could boost treble. It gets a little bit harsh. Or we could remove low end. That sounds a lot smoother on the top to me. So before and after, here we go in the mix.
If you've never used the LDFC method before, try it ASAP. It is a game changer. This method forces you to listen intentionally, and it works every time. And a pro tip, don't half-ass the last step. The compare step is your reality check. It makes sure that you're actually improving the mix, not just moving settings around. All right. Myth number 4, which is that mastering will fix the mix. And this is the ultimate pass the buck myth. You've worked on a mix for days. You know the snare is too loud, the vocals have harsh sibilance, and the bass is muddy, but you tell yourself, it's fine. The mastering engineer is going to fix it. This comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what mastering actually is. The truth is, mastering can polish a mix, but it can't fix it. Mastering is the final step where an engineer works with a single stereo file, your final mix down. They can't go in and turn down just the snare, or DS just the vocals, or EQ the mud out of just the bass guitar. If the mix is broken, it stays broken. But what can mastering actually do? It can make the overall track louder and more competitive. It can adjust the overall EQ balance if the whole mix is a little too dark or a little too bright. It can use stereo widening to make the track feel bigger. It's the final coat of polish that makes a collection of songs feel like a cohesive album. But it's absolutely not a rescue mission. If your kick drum tone is shit, mastering won't fix that. If your vocals sound terrible, mastering won't fix them. The worse your mix is, the less your mastering engineer is going to have to work with, and the harder it'll be for them to get you a good result. As a mixer, it's your responsibility to deliver a file that's balanced, dynamic, and sounds great on its own. When you're bouncing your final mix to send to mastering, make sure your master fader isn't clipping and that you're leaving a good amount of headroom. Mastering engineers generally like to have about 6 dB of headroom to work with. Don't send them a file that's already smashed to hell with a limiter. Give them room to work their magic. But remember, their magic is polishing, not fixing. Get the mix right first. And finally, myth number 5, which is that you should always mix at a low volume. And honestly, this myth comes from a good place. Engineers stress working at low volumes to prevent ear fatigue and to save their hearing. That's really important. Your hearing does not grow back. So if you're blasting your ears for hours on end, you're gonna do some permanent damage. Plus, in the short term, mixing really loud makes your ears get tired quickly. You lose your perception of high end and your mix decisions get worse and worse. But the idea that you should only mix at one single low volume, that's a huge mistake. The truth is that mixing at one volume only gives you one perspective. Our ears don't perceive all the frequencies equally at different volumes. This is thanks to something called the Fletcher-Munson curves. At low volumes, our ears are most sensitive to the mid-range. This is why mixing quietly can be great for setting vocal levels or making sure the snare isn't getting buried. But at low volumes, you can barely hear the super low sub bass or the shimmery high-end air. As you turn the volume up, your perception of the lows and highs increases dramatically. And that's why you have to check your mix at different volume levels. If you only mix quietly, you'll probably end up with a mix that has way too much sub bass because you kept turning it up just to be able to hear it. Then when someone plays it on a loud system, it's a muddy mess. You can't really hear what the low end is doing unless you turn it up. It just has to be louder to properly judge it. The best mixers are constantly changing their monitoring levels. They spend most of their time at a conversational volume, but they also crank it up for short bursts to check the power in the low end, and they turn it way down to check the basic balances. They listen on big monitors, on crappy speakers, in headphones, and in the car. They're looking for different things at each level. So here's an actionable workflow for you. Spend the majority of your mix time at a volume level where you could comfortably have a conversation with someone next to you. But every 20 or 30 minutes, do two things. First, crank the volume for about 15 to 20 seconds. How does it feel? Is the low end overwhelming? Is the high end painful? This is your power check. Second, turn the volume down so low that you can barely hear the music. When you're turning it down, notice what's the last thing to disappear. It should be the most important elements, usually the kick, snare, and lead vocals. If the vocal vanishes but you can still clearly hear the hi-hats, your balance is off. Again, use different volumes to get different perspectives. So there you have it. 5 myths that are way too common and way too destructive. Stop chasing EQ recipes. Stop thinking software is a magic button. Start using different monitoring volumes. Use the tools that work for you. And for the love of everything heavy, get your mix right before you send it to mastering. What's the worst piece of recording or mixing advice you've ever gotten? Let me know in the comments below. As always, like, share, subscribe. See you next time.